China is actually set to enact a sweeping national privacy law starting November 1st. Now, this law is one of the strictest in the world, actually, and closely resembles in a lot of ways Europe's GDPR, which is the first sort of general data protection regulation of its kind. Importantly, though, there is less scrutiny on the government in terms of its data collection and a lot of scrutiny on companies in terms of minimizing the amount of data they collect on customers, as well as obtaining prior consent for that data. Naomi, I'm tossing this one straight to you, and we can unpack this further.
For sure. So it's a very interesting story, because if you look at how the US collects data, it actually collects it through these big tech companies, right? You have programs like the PRISM program, where they have direct access to the servers of places like, Microsoft and Yahoo and Google and all of these companies. And so the government is never going to implement those kinds of controls in the US. They want that data. Even when Zoom came out and you found out it wasn't really end-to-end encrypted and the government was like, we're going to reprimand you, they never said you need to actually implement this end-to-end encryption, because they don't want them to. They wanted them, to keep this stuff open so they continue to get access to all of this stuff. And it's interesting because in China, it's a very different situation. It is absolutely, there's nothing tying their hands. In the US, we kind of have these vague things in the Constitution that the government's like, yeah, we're totally abiding by that, but really they're just going through all these loopholes and doing what they want, and often violating the Constitution as well, as courts have found since the Snowden revelations. But in China, you've got nothing like that. And so the government doesn't care if they have a monopoly on data collection. They can outright collect as much data as they want. There's no uproar. There's nothing tying their hands. There's no pushback at all from citizens there. And so what you've got now, some people are like, well, data protection, this is great. This is kind of mimicking what the EU has. And it's not at all. All they're doing is just having a monopoly on the collection of information. And it's kind of a worse situation, because instead of private companies being able to, benefit from this or see what's going on or having any sort of, clarity into all kinds of data, instead the government has a monopoly on all of this. And I think that this is all just a continuation of what we've seen with the Chinese government cracking down on IPOs on American stock markets, because their main concern when that happened was that if these companies IPO'd on New York Stock Exchange, then American companies, or the American government in particular, would get access to this data from these Chinese companies, and the government didn't want this. And so now it seems that they're curtailing the data collection of the companies themselves. Meanwhile, the Chinese government is allowed to collect as much as it wants. So interesting story, not good for the citizens of China at all. Obviously, privacy laws are great, and I actually like what the EU has put in place there. But it's just not what we have in the situation that's going on in China. But Zach, I think I saw your hand go up.
No, I think Jen beat me to it, and I think Ben also wanted in. So Jen,
I think
take
we all put our hand up.
I saw someone's hand. I was just like,
I was just fidgeting.
Somewhere.
I was just fidgeting around. Anyway.
I was just going to say,
this is
just another notch in the tech crackdown happening in China. I was at PwC in Shanghai 2 to 3 years ago now, and we were talking about the shopping experience in China. And when I read the story, it made me think about that. So we were talking about an experience that they were testing out 2 to 3 years ago, where you would walk into the store, you'd be recognized by your WeChat ID, you'd immediately get served personalized ads on the billboards that are in that store. Those billboards would direct you then to clothes that you would like, depending on your online activity. You would go to that section, your size would be identified for you. If you wanted those items, you would take them and leave the store, and the money would come out of your WeChat wallet. So when I read the story, I think about the huge implication that this is going to have to tech giants in China. And it just points to the government really using different narratives to crack down on big tech in China. And it is scary. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I will pass it off to you, Ben, and then to Will.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we can kind of hit the privacy aspect of this and the data security aspect of it a little bit ad nauseum. But to me, maybe what stuck out here is the fact of, not only, and maybe it is that bigger tech crackdown and the damage that's being done to these companies in a lot of ways to try and rein them back in. These are some of the more valuable companies in the world, right? Like Alibaba, other ones, and they're multi-million dollar corporations. And data is a huge part of that. And to me, we've seen the stocks take a little bit of a tumble as China's continues to crack down. This is just going to be another step of that. And I do think also it's going to be interesting and hurt companies further as they work to kind of build out compliance with this law, right? And one of the analysts in the piece said that, if companies are in compliance with GDPR. They really shouldn't have a problem being in compliance with this one. But I think it is just having to build out more and more infrastructure and further going to, hurt the value of these companies. And looking at China as the second largest economy in the world, this could have implications for that too, right? These things have ripple effects that, could affect geopolitical instances. And there's also a national security provision here that is going to further complicate, data being moved offshore and scrutinized in a variety of ways. But Will, I'll toss to you.
I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head all around here. Like, China's cracking down on tech stocks, and then messaging itself is just being cracked down on. Government has the ability to surveil all this, and tech companies, they're just giving all that data over to China anyways. But I'm going to throw it up to you, Naomi, for better insights than I have on this topic.
Yeah, I'll just mention that with GDPR, why I'm not 100% on board with it, even though I like the idea of protection of privacy, is that when it comes down to enforcement of this, it's completely arbitrary. GDPR is so comprehensive and it's so difficult to figure out whether companies are actually complying or whether they're not. So when it comes to actually, navigating this world and figuring out, are these companies doing what they're meant to? The enforcement is arbitrary. The government is picking winners and losers. And so it ends up just being a landscape that's very uneven, where the government can choose, okay, we're going to crack down on you and make sure you're enforcing, but we're not going to look into this other company there. So that's why I don't like laws like this, because enforcement is so difficult and it just makes things more unequal for companies. But, in this situation, government in China is like, no, blanket rule, none of you, and we're the only ones who can collect data. Not a good situation.